And I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, here we go. Well, once again, I want to welcome you to our presentation using your UPlan savings. This is actually the first time we're going to be going over this content. I'll tell you that we created this pretty recently due to some customer feedback that while we had some great information about how you can open an account and how you can contribute to that account, once it comes time to use the money, we could stand to have a little bit more guidance on that. So took that to heart and created this presentation. And I imagine many of you, probably all of you, are UPlan customers who had some questions about how to use your savings. And so we're a little bit later in the process in the calendar than probably ideal to go over this information, but I think it's important to do that anyways. And once again, if you have any questions throughout, please do not hesitate to put those into the Q&A. In fact, the chat feature is disabled, so you won't be able to communicate through chat with me, but it's much easier for me to see questions when they pop up through the Q&A anyway. So if you just want to go on and say hi, or you can hear me or whatever it might be, you can just start putting questions in now if you want to. That's fine. And I can answer those questions as we go. If I don't answer your question right away, it's probably because the answer to that question is coming up and I'm going to get to it. And also I can be around later on to discuss anything that we haven't gone over that you have questions about. I see somebody put in a little question in the Q&A now and just, oh, they're getting an echo. Is anybody else getting an echo? See what I can do about that. If they are. I'll move on for the moment, but if anybody else is experiencing an echo, please let me know. I also wanted to point out to you that there is a live transcript feature if you wanted to have a transcript printed out as we go along. My name is Jonathan Hughes. I'm the Associate Director of College Planning and Content Creation at MIFA. I've been at MIFA for a really long time and worked with the UPlan specifically for a really long time. Now, if you're customers, you may know that we managed the UPlan in-house for a very, very long time, and I was part of that team. From 2004, I believe I started working on the UPlan up and manage the accounts. And if you had a question about your UPlan account, you might call and get me. It was about a 1 in 3 chance that you would. Since 2019, we have been able to expand what we're able to do as a program because it started to be serviced by US Bank. And so we no longer service these in-house, but I mention all this just to tell you that I have a lot of experience working specifically with the UPlan and UPlan account, so I'm very familiar with the program. Now, I assume you're at least somewhat familiar with MIFA if you're UPlan customers, but just in case, I'll tell you that MIFA is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We were created by the Massachusetts State Legislature back in 1982. And we have a public service mission to help families to plan, save, and pay for college. So one of the first things the first thing really that we were created to do was to offer a loan, which is something that we still do. And that's an example of how we help folks pay for college. Of course, since 1982, when we were created, and this is particularly relevant when it comes to the UPlan, but the cost of college has continued to rise, as you've noticed. And so we added a couple of savings programs, the first of which is the UPlan. That was in 1995. It was the country's second prepaid tuition program. And it is a unique program, and very proud of the UPlan and really, really like the UPlan personally. So I'm happy to talk about it with you. What we're going to go over tonight, we're going to start with financial aid. I kind of want to take this chronologically and say, okay, when is the first time that you might start thinking about how you're going to use your UPlan certificates when you get to college? And the first time probably is when you're filling out your financial aid forms. And so if you have a senior going to college this year in the fall, you've done that already. If you're a little bit, if you have kids who are a little bit younger than that, this will be important to you. This is how you can actually If you have to claim your U plan on your financial aid forms, how you do that and how does it interact with financial aid. Then we'll talk about how specifically you can request a distribution. And distribution is a payment from your account. And so we'll talk about the different ways in which you can call us up, email us, go online, let us know in writing that you want funds sent out from your account to a college or to yourself. We'll talk about the timeline of when exactly you can do that, because I know that's a big issue for folks. Calculating your U-Plan value, particularly in the year that you are set to go to college. So you have annual statements, you have account statements that show what you put in, plus the interest shows you what percentage you might have at every particular college. How do you figure out how much money that's actually going to turn into? Talk about post-maturity interest, which we'll get into later on, and then leftover funds. So what if you don't use all the funds that you have in your account, or if you don't use your entire certificate in a year, what can you do? So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A, and we can get to that. Okay, so first of all, the U-Plan and financial aid. So people want to know sometimes if you're required to list the U-Plan on the FAFSA anywhere. If you're not aware, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and it is sort of the big financial aid form that you have to fill out if you want any aid from the federal government, any aid from state governments. And most colleges just use the FAFSA to determine their need-based financial aid. So FAFSA is something that really anybody going to college who wants some aid should file, and it goes to every college that you're applying to. Now, some colleges want another form in addition to the FAFSA, and that's something that you want to just make sure that you research the college list that your student is applying to. When are they going to get a FAFSA? Because they all need it and they all have a FAFSA deadline. And then do they need anything else? There's another form you might be familiar with called the CSS profile, and that is the most popular secondary form that you may need to file. But we're going to be talking about the FAFSA specifically here tonight. And so the U-Plan is expected to be listed on the FAFSA if the parent is the owner of the U-Plan account. So students typically do not own U-Plan accounts. The owner of the U-Plan has to be at least 18. So typically it's parent who is the owner. It gets listed as a parent asset. And so what you're expected to list on the section where they ask you to list any assets is what you have in the account plus whatever interest has accrued on that. So I know you're locking in a percentage of tuition with the U-Plan. They don't expect you to try to figure out whatever that percentage of tuition is going to be valued at. You just put what you put in plus the interest. So not your prepaid tuition. So another thing that I think is important to note is that your U-Plan percentage, the percentage of tuition that you locked in, is not based on whatever you owe at the college. It's the total tuition and mandatory fees. So that's before financial aid. So what I mean is if your college costs $10,000, although very few do these days, and you're eligible for, I'm sorry, if your college costs $10,000 and you purchase 100% of tuition, so you have $10,000 saved for the U-Plan and ready to go, and then you get your financial aid and you get some grants and you get some loans, etc., and you find out that you only owe $5,000, you're still locked in to 100% of that $10,000 fee. So it's not that you have now $5,000. That's not what your U-Plan certificate is worth. It's worth the full $10,000. So you would have money left over in that circumstance. So it's important to realize that what you have locked in is pre-aid. It's the tuition and mandatory fee figure. Tuition is clearly spelled out. Mandatory fees are fees that every student has to pay, regardless of whether or not they live on campus and regardless of their year. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that when we talk about calculating your balance, your U-Plan payment. but your amount locked in, your percentage is based on the full tuition figure. So that way it goes even further once you start factoring in any aid that you received. And then finally, just a pointer that if you get scholarships, if you get outside scholarships from other organizations or scholarships from the college, use all of those things first before you start dipping into your savings and your U-Plan funds. So it sounds common sense, and it usually is for many folks, but I just think it's good to keep in mind, because if you've got a lot of different pieces of financial aid and savings and sort of different resources that you can use to help fill and pay the college bill, you want to make sure that you maximize the free money that you get before you start dipping into your own savings. Somebody has a question here. It's a long one, so bear with me. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. We're going to get to that question in a little while. It's a great question. So thank you. But it is something that I want to speak to. But I'm not going to do it just yet. Okay. So here we're moving into the timeline. When can I start using my U-Plan savings? So your U-Plan certificates, when you put money in and you designated a maturity year, that's the year that the bond becomes liquid, right? And so let's say if you have a 2023 maturity year for your U-Plan, that matures August 1st of 2023. So sometimes this trips people up because they assume it's going to be January 1st. It's August 1st. So it's for the school year beginning in 2023. So that's when your U-Plan certificate matures. That's when it can actually be sent out to a college or to you personally. So we know that sometimes this is, a lot of times, in fact, this is after colleges want the funds, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But what we do is sort of our calendar for you requesting the funds begins in March. So in March, we send out notifications to everybody that has certificates that are maturing this August, and they can request a distribution to a college or to be cashed out. And after the 1st of August, this can be done. So you can start to direct these funds and let us know where, beginning in August, and then you'll be notified by email or paper mail, depending how your account is set up, that this is available to be done. So you'll be notified. You don't have to remember. We will do that. Now, U-Plan funds are dispersed year round. So we're always doing U-Plan distributions throughout the year. But the calendar year for U-Plan distributions begins the first Friday in August for school distributions. That's our first distribution to a college. So, and then if you have funds that you're cashing out and getting what you put in plus the interest, August 1st is the date where that matures. And again, we can start sending funds out to you then. We have all summer to sort of do that. And so how you request funds, you can either, if you're set up to get paper mail, to be notified about with your account statements and anything like that through the mail. That is, if you haven't set up online access to your U-Plan account, we're going to send you a distribution request form. And then you'll have a few options of how you want us to use those funds, and you can sign that and send it back to us. We'll keep that request on file until it's matured and then act on that. You can also go online if you have created an online account and go and sort of designate your distributions to a college or to yourself that way. Or you can call up. And one of the benefits of having this sort of outside provider of US Bank or servicer of US Bank is they have a recorded phone line, so you can go and call and say, I want funds sent to Boston College, or I want funds cashed out to me as soon as it matures. They'll process that request. It'll be kept on file and be acted upon when it's available to do so. So it's very easy to be able to request funds. And that's the phone number right there, 888-590-5653. If you have questions, if you think you should have received something and you haven't, you can call that number up and find out what the status of your account is. Now, when you get these, let's say the paper forms, and this is very sort of baked into my brain because that's all we used to do is paper. And we would send out all of these distribution request forms, and they would have three options on it. Send funds to a participating college, cash out to owner, or hold. And so hold just means do nothing. We can hold on to these certificates until about 6 years after they mature. So we know sometimes that people take gap years, maybe their plans aren't finalized, maybe you put money in the wrong year and you just want to hold on to it. We can hold on to these funds until 6 years after they mature. Really usually longer, but at a certain point you have to do something with them. You can cash out to yourself as the owner, and only the owner can do this. So if you do that, if this child is not attending a participating college or university for whatever reason, and you don't want to hold, and there's no other beneficiaries that you can transfer the account to, because you can do that as well, you can always get what you put in plus the interest back. And so this has been accruing at CPI, which historically is on the low side, but over the past 2 years or so, it's been quite high. So we have accounts that are accruing a lot of interest. And so if you cash out the funds, you get what you put in plus the interest. And we'll talk a little bit about taxes, but just so you know, receiving funds, cashing out funds, using any distribution method at all, whether it's to the college or to the owner, distributions don't carry tax consequences for either the state of Massachusetts, and it's our bond counsel's opinion that they don't have any federal tax consequences as well. If you're living in another state, your state may have some tax consequences associated with it, but for federal and for the state of Massachusetts, it's our opinion that there is no tax consequences associated. And then finally, of course, if you're sending funds to a participating college, you tell us what college you want the funds to go to, and then you can specify the full amount or a portion of that amount, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So assuming, since the other options are pretty simple, either you're cashing out, you're holding, those are pretty simple, but college distributions is where most of the questions get into. And this is how the program is designed. So, we know that funds typically go further, and this is going to get to that question that's been asked, if they're sent to a college then cashed out, because you're not getting what you put in plus the interest when it's sent to a college. You're getting whatever percentage of tuition you purchased when you put money in. And so the rate of inflation has probably stepped inflation, CPI. So you have a few different options in how you can send the funds to the college, and it really kind of depends on how much you have saved. So if you have 100% of tuition and fees saved, most people don't. So please don't think by leading with this example that this is something a lot of people have. They don't. This can be sent to the college, but it depends. There are different types of colleges who want the funds sent to them all at once in the beginning of the academic year. And then some colleges want the funds broken up per semester. And so this is how this is going to be broken down. If you have 100% of tuition and fees, we're going to send 50% in the fall semester and then 50% in the spring semester. And the colleges have designated dates on which they receive those. So they come into the UPlan system and they set up, yep, I want my fall distributions, let's say August 3rd or whatever the first Friday in August is this year. And then I want my spring distributions to be sent in December, December 17th, whatever that date that may be for the college. It's all according to their schedule. And this is something that they set up. So it's very simple. If you have 100%, they split it evenly, 50 and 50. If you have a less than 50%, well, then it all goes in the first semester. But if you have between 50 and 100% purchased, we don't take what you have. Let's say you have 70% of tuition. We don't split your amount 35% and then 35%. we fully pay the first semester. So 50% would go towards the first semester to completely pay it. And then whatever's remaining goes in the second semester. So you'd have uneven disbursements. And sometimes that's generated calls where people said, how come I didn't have as much this semester as I had last semester? Because we front loaded to pay your current bill, and then whatever's remaining goes in the second semester. I should say, if you don't want to do it this way, you can always specify how you want it done. So if you want 35, because you have 70% of tuition and fees saved, and you want to use 35% and 35% to split what you have equally, you can certainly do that. You don't even have to do one payment per semester. I know sometimes some customers pay almost every month with their U-Plan disbursements. I'm not saying that that's the way to do it. I'm just saying that you have a lot of flexibility in how, but this is how we default to distributions for colleges that want their payments split per semester. And then finally, if you have more money saved than you need for the year, that's great, but we can't send any more than 100% of tuition and mandatory fees for the year. So let's say a college has $30,000 as their tuition and mandatory fee figure, and you have 110% of that saved because you put in a lot of money and it exceeds 100%. We can still only send $30,000 to the college. We can't send any more than that to them, even though you may have other bills at the college that the U-Plan maybe doesn't account for, things like room and board, or not room, they call it something else now, they call it food and housing. So food and housing, the U-Plan doesn't pay for food and housing. We pay for tuition and mandatory fees. Mandatory fees are something that every student has to pay regardless of whether they live on campus. So commuter students are not going to be paying room and board. Therefore, it's not a mandatory fee. I am going to, I'm going to answer this question after this slide. So let's say, again, you're sending a U-Plan payment to a college, and you've indicated that that's what you want us to do. You want us to send everything you've got to the college. And then you want to know how much that's going to be, because you need to figure out how much you need to pay once that U-Plan has been sent to a college and paid. Maybe you're thinking about borrowing a loan for some or all of the rest of the balance. So you really need to know how much is left. And this is where sometimes we run into a bit of an issue. And the reason is because, remember our calendar, you can start designating these funds. If you have accounts maturing in August, you can tell us in March, April, May, June that you want funds sent to that college. But we won't know the exact value of that until the college gives us their tuition for the upcoming year. And so we send out forms to the colleges, we send out requests for them to send us their tuition and mandatory fee figures for the upcoming year so that we can enter those into our system and start calculating the payments to the college and how much you're going to be seeing from the U-Plan on a dollar value basis to the college. So what is my 50% at Boston College going to end up being? And so there's oftentimes a lag time between when you tell us to put the funds in and what when you know that the value of that payment. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're sending a distribution to a college, you can request all the available funds to be sent. So if you have 100% of tuition, if you have 50% of tuition, if you have 5% of tuition, and you want to send all of that, you can just say, send everything. If you have more than you need, or you don't know exactly how much you want to, or you don't want to use everything that you have saved, you can tell us to send 10%. I want 10% of tuition and fees to be paid. I have 60%, use 10% and pay to the college. You can do that online. You can tell us that. You can write that to us. You can specify a certain dollar amount, and then we'll figure out how much to take out of your account in order to pay that dollar amount, given the increase in tuition, the percentage that you have. I tend to think it's easier if you're requesting a specific amount. Let's say you've got $10,000 and your bill is only $2,000 for the first semester. Sometimes people get really sort of in their heads and they try to figure out, okay, but if I bought 20%, then what's 20% of this? Just tell us the dollar amount and we'll figure out how much to take out of your account to send to the college. And if you're requesting a cash out to the owner, you can either request everything that's in your account or a certain dollar amount as well. So you don't have to take everything if you're cashing out as well. And just to let you know, this is the list of participating UPlan colleges and universities. I'll leave that up here for a minute while I answer this question that just came in. So I'm going to read it. Our child is attending a university that is a participating college in the UPlan. We went to redeem our certificates to have the proceeds sent directly to the college, and we were surprised to see some of it would be sent to us directly. We understand now that this may be because the rate of inflation of tuition was less than the rate of CPI for those certificates. Can you explain how this works and if there are any taxes due? Sure. So you were almost certainly correct that, without being able to see your account, that that the reason you got if you requested a distribution be sent out to a college and you got it to yourself, it's because it's worth more that way. So in fact, the system will not allow us to send money to a college if it is worth more cashed out to the owner. The reason it might be worth more cashed out to the owner is because, remember, you have an investment here and it's accruing interest at CPI. But if you're sending money to a college, the amount that you want to keep your eye on, of course, is the percentage of tuition. So in this example, the rate of tuition accrued slower, went up sort of at a slower pace than the inflation. So this is fairly rare when it comes to the UPlan. So let's say if you put in, again, I'm going to just do this to make my math easy because I'm not good at math. But if you had 100%, say you put in $10,000 and that bought 100% of tuition one year at a college that cost $10,000. And now it's time to go to college. And so what you put in plus the interest, plus the CPI, let's say it has a $13,000 balance. But tuition at that college stayed stagnant for a couple of years or went up very little from one year to the next. And 100% of tuition then is only $1,285. If that's the case, again, the system will not allow us to send that to the college. It has to be cashed out to you because it's worth more. That's how it works. With CPI being so high over the past couple of years, that's become a little bit more common. I think it's probably still less common than the opposite, but it is more common than it's been. So that's why you got it. And then as far as taxes, again, cashing funds out, using funds at a college, neither of those carry any tax consequences for the state of Massachusetts. And once again, it's our bond counsel's opinion that there's no federal taxes associated with it. So that's, and I know it can be very confusing when that happens. And you think, wait a minute, no, I want this to go to the college. You have to do it that way because it's worth more to you. Somebody had another question here. One of my maturity years is 2025, but the rest of them is 2023. What does that mean? Can I still use that amount for the 2023 fall semester? No, you would not be able to use that. So you would not be able to use it until August 1st of 2025. I would suggest, and I can reach out to you later on to see if anything is possible, but I think, especially since we're on the cusp of August 1st, that is going to be matured. That 2023 certificate is going to be matured. If you have a maturity year that is wrong for your years, you can request a maturity year change, but we have limited capability to act on that. But we will take the requests and we'll see what we can do. But we can talk later, and I can take a look at the account and we can see if there are any. I mean, if the student is going to be in college in 2025, you can use it then, of course. But the money itself does not become liquid. It doesn't become money that you can use to pay for college until it matures. So that would be August 1st of 2025 in that case. And also, when you put funds in, there's a 5-year minimum, and this may be part of the reason why you have a 2025 certificate, is that there's a 5-year minimum between when you can put money in and when you can use it. The money has to stay in the bond at least 5 years before it's matured. Okay, now a follow-up question here. Can we just turn around and send what is just distributed to us directly to the? Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes, I should have said that. You certainly can, and I expected that you would have taken whatever you have that we have cashed out to you. This is for the family who wanted the funds sent to the school and got their check. You can send those funds to the college, and I expected that you would. And is there any difference in getting it distributed to us versus the institution? In other words, no, you can do that. I mean, okay, now we're going to move on. Okay, I'm sorry, I got my slides mixed up. This is what I was sort of saying earlier, that there's a lag time between when we know the dollar value of the certificates to be sent to the college, and when you have designated them to the college. I will tell you that, again, we send out a request to the colleges for them to get us their tuition and fee figures. Most colleges, so you can call back and check and see, again, I keep saying Boston College, but I wanted money to go to Boston College. Have they gotten their tuition back to you yet, so I can know what it is? You can call up and ask that. And if we have that figure, we can let you know, what the value of that would be. I will tell you that most colleges have gotten their tuition and fee figures back to us yet, but some take longer than others. And it's not that they're, dragging their feet or anything like that. It's just that different colleges, and certainly different types of colleges, have their own procedures. So, it can be more difficult for some colleges to get their tuition and fee figures for the year to settled earlier than others. Now, you should know this. Once we do get a distribution request from you, and it does say, I want this to go to a college, we enter that in as a pending distribution to a college. Colleges can go onto the UPlan site and view their pending distribution, so they can see, because as I mentioned before, a lot of the times colleges want payments either very near or sometimes before August 1st. And so people get a little nervous because they want their money before then, but you're not going to be able to send it until after. And so if that's the case, colleges can go onto the UPlan system and look and see that we have a distribution, the UPlan distribution for the student, and to be able to see the information regarding that, and so that they can note that in their files. And then also, they would have to take that step themselves. And now they're very busy over the summer. So at a certain point during the summer, we do sort of proactively send them a pre-disbursement roster to a designated person at the financial aid office with all of the students that have pending distributions to that college. So they're going to see that, and they're going to take a look and see all the students that they have with their distributions and their sort of estimated payment amounts to their account at that college. So they'll be notified of that. So it's still worth it for you to get that to us in early, so that, typically that happens in July, that we send out that pre-disbursement roster. So if you think there may be an issue, or if you really want to get in before the pre-disbursement roster goes out, it's not a bad idea. So you can always tell the school that they're on the roster. For cash out distributions, it's something sort of similar. If you're having if your child is not going to participate in college, it might get a little hairier because those colleges won't be able to go on to the UPlan site and see, oh yes, this person is cashing out their UPlan. If they're not participating schools, they just don't have that. You would just let them know that you have this money from the UPlan and they're going to be sending out a check. And, you just really have to keep in contact with the financial aid office. Now, there's going to be a final round of interest that gets assessed on your account for the August distribution. So again, we won't know exactly how much is going to be going out to you until pretty much right before it goes out. But by looking at your statement or your account online, you have a running sort of balance of what you've put in plus the interest thus far. So you'll know it's at least as much as the current balance. But we won't be able to send those out until August 1st. And once again, for cash out distributions, that goes out in a check to you if you've got all your correspondence going through mail. If you've set up an online account and provided banking information, that can be sent directly to the bank account. Once again, UPlan payments to a college of a maturity year. The first UPlan payments to a college of a certain maturity year begin the first Friday in August. So the first Friday in August 2023 is when we're going to start distributing funds to colleges for this academic year. Pre-disbursement rosters are available. Now, how money actually gets sent to colleges? Again, these go out every Friday. There is a distribution to colleges. Most colleges get checks still, although colleges can sign up for a wire payment, so they can go onto the MIFA site and get the funds wired to them. And of course, that's quicker. Most colleges have not done that yet. We're still sort of onboarding them to do that. So hopefully we'll get more. And once again, for cash out distributions to owners, that can be, so it doesn't have to be on Friday, it can go throughout the week. And depending on how your setup is, it can go directly into your bank account or be mailed to you. Now we're going to touch briefly on tax notifications and post-maturity interest here. This is, again, chronologically sort of after things have gone out. I've mentioned a few times that using funds, distributing them to a college or to you as the owner, do not carry tax consequences from Massachusetts or Brown Council's opinion for federal taxes. That doesn't mean that the UPlan is completely without any potential tax consequences. There are two tax forms that may be triggered. One of them is a 1099 DIV, and that is for post-maturity interest. Now, remember I said you can hold on to certificates until 6 years or so after they mature. Once a certificate matures, it ceases to accrue CPI interest, but it still gains interest at a money market rate. Any interest that accrues post-maturity over $10 is required to be reported in a 1099 DIV. So this is just having funds in a UPlan that it's already matured and it's continuing to gain interest. Over $10 in a given year, that has to be reported. How or whether that affects your taxes is between you, that's for your tax preparer to determine. And also there's another form that was just issued, started to be issued this year. It's a 1099 OID, stands for original issue discount. This is, I'm not a tax preparer per se, so this has a different trigger to it. And if you get one of those, you'll notice that it does say tax exempt interest on it. But as in all tax questions, you should check with your tax preparer for if this may affect your taxes at all. Now, I do want to mention a little bit more about post-maturity interest. Again, this is the interest that accrues after the bond has matured. This, if you're sending funds to a college that have matured, so let's say you you have one of these certificates that you've kept in because the student has taken a gap year or didn't know what they were going to do, and then you decided to use it later. That gets sent to a college, but all the post-maturity interest by law has to be sent out to the owner. So the owner's going to get that post-maturity interest. So people sometimes get really confused because, sometimes post-maturity interest is for a very small amount. Or even if it isn't, they're sort of, I didn't ask for this money. Why do I have this check? And they get nervous maybe about taxes or something. But it doesn't, getting a PMI check or anything like that, first of all, it has to go out to the owner, any post-maturity interest. And then the actual using of the money doesn't trigger tax consequences. But if it accrued over $10 in a given year, that triggers the paperwork. Now, if you have any leftover funds, if you sent funds to a college and maybe you had over 100% purchased, maybe, you have money from an earlier year, maybe that was transferred over from another older sibling. Maybe what you have left after financial aid wasn't everything that you had saved. You still have money left over. You have a couple options. You can cash out, get what you put in plus the interest. You can use that for things like food and housing or some other costs that the U-Plan doesn't lock in. You can hold it and use it in a later year. And then it would still be worth what it was worth in the maturity year. It's not going to gain value with tuition anymore because it's matured, but it'll lock in, it'll still retain that value of what you had when you locked in the maturity year. And then, of course, post-maturity interest would continue to accrue on top of that as well. Or you can, again, transfer any leftover funds to another beneficiary within the family. So if you have any leftover funds, you can do that as well. I see we have another question here. We're going to leave our social media information up. Somebody said they know 8/4 was listed as the distribution date. Is that the date the cash outs are sent? I believe so. I can double check on that though. But yes, 8/4 would be the first Friday in August is when our first distribution goes out. So yes. So anyways, as you see here, we have our social media information, our Facebook channel, MIFA MA, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our MIFA podcast. If there are any questions that I didn't address, or if you have any questions related to your U-Plan, or if you have questions about how else you're gonna start paying for college, once again, this is our information here, and you'll have my direct line and email once you get the recording and the deck from me in about a day or so. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything I didn't cover? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and good luck.